Welcome to Moonlit Inc. BL. A story written under moonlight. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Weight of Cold Water. The world was a cacophony of screeching metal and the rhythmic, frantic thud of Silvester's own heart. Rain lashed against the windshield of his sports car, turning the city lights into smeared neon scars. Ahead of him, the taillights of Vincent Storybrook's vehicle were a taunt, a crimson challenge Silvester had spent his entire life trying to overtake. Just a little faster, Silvester thought, his knuckles white against the leather steering wheel. If I win this, I win everything. Then came the flash of silver, another car, drifting into his lane. Silvester jerked the wheel. The tires lost their grip on the slick asphalt, singing a high-pitched dirge as the car spun. The guardrail didn't feel like a barrier, it felt like a ribbon of paper as he smashed through it. For a heartbeat, there was a terrifying, weightless silence. Then, the plunge. The impact with the river was a physical blow that knocked the air from his lungs. Cold, black water surged into the cabin, smelling of oil and ancient silt. As the car sank, Silvester struggled against his seatbelt, his vision blurring. Through the sinking glass, he saw the bridge high above. Vincent's car had stopped. A silhouette stood at the railing, looking down. He's watching me die, Silvester realized, a sudden, jagged grief cutting through his panic. I spent my whole life trying to ruin him, and now I'm just a ghost in his rearview mirror. As the freezing water filled his throat, Silvester closed his eyes. If I could go back, I wouldn't spend my breath hating you. I'd use it to tell you to stop running. Darkness took him. Silvester bolted upright with a gasp that tore at his lungs. He wasn't cold. He wasn't wet. He was tangled in 800 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets in his penthouse overlooking the district. The air smelled of expensive sandalwood and espresso, not river mud. A dream, he whispered, his voice rasping. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. The date glared back at him, March 2nd. His blood turned to ice. This was exactly 1 year before the crash. He was back. He was 26 again, at the height of his power, and exactly 365 days away from a watery grave. Silvester threw back the covers and stumbled toward the ensuite bathroom. His legs felt heavy, uncoordinated, as if he were learning to walk in a body that shouldn't exist. He gripped the marble edge of the vanity, his head hanging low as he tried to regulate his breathing. I'm alive. I'm actually alive. He looked up into the mirror, expecting to see the familiar, cold blue eyes that had glared back at him for a decade. He froze. His silver hair was the same, messy from sleep, falling over his forehead in sharp arcs. His height was still imposing, his shoulders broad. But his eyes. His right eye remained that piercing, icy blue of the Crown family lineage. But his left eye had transformed. It was now a deep, vibrant forest green, swirling with a life that hadn't been there before. It was as if the river had washed away half of his old self and replaced it with something grounded, something living. Heterochromia, he murmured, leaning closer to the glass. It wasn't just a medical anomaly, it felt like a brand. A reminder that he was no longer the failed rival. He was a glitch in the timeline. He thought of Vincent. Right now, Vincent would be in his office, likely staring at a bottle of anti-anxiety meds, his heart racing as he prepared for the quarterly awards. In the original timeline, Silvester had spent this morning leaking a scandal about Vincent's production line to ensure his rival looked weak. Silvester reached for his laptop, his fingers hovering over the send button on the draft of that very leak. With a steady hand, he hit delete. This time, Silvester told his reflection, the green eye catching the morning light, I'm not the one who breaks you, Vincent. I'm the only one who stays. Chapter 2, The First Encounter. The grand ballroom of the Storybrook Plaza was a cathedral of glass and gold, designed specifically to make everyone inside feel small, everyone except the man at the podium. In his past life, Silvester had loved this room. He had loved the way the champagne bubbled like liquid ego and the way the industry titans whispered his name in the same breath as prodigy. Today, however, the air felt thin. Every laugh sounded like a pre-recorded track, and the scent of expensive lilies was cloying, masking the underlying smell of desperation. Silvester stood at the back of the hall, his towering frame cutting a sharp silhouette against the mahogany doors. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit, his fingers grazing the skin of his wrist. His pulse was steady, a miracle compared to the frantic drumming of the man currently on stage. Vincent Storybrook. From this distance, Vincent looked perfect. His suit was tailored to military precision, his dark hair swept back without a strand out of place. But Silvester's new eyes, that strange, dual-colored gaze, saw the truth. He saw the way Vincent's left hand gripped the edge of the lectern until his knuckles turned ghostly white. He saw the subtle, rhythmic twitch in Vincent's jaw and the way he blinked too fast, fighting the blurred vision that came with a brewing panic attack. He's drowning right now, Silvester thought, a pang of guilt sharp as a razor wire twisting in his chest. And in my first life, I was the one holding his head under. And now, the master of ceremonies announced, his voice booming through the speakers, to present the critique for the Storybrook Urban Initiative, we invite his fiercest competitor and the CEO of Crown International, Silvester Crown. A ripple of expectant murmurs traveled through the crowd. This was the moment everyone came for, the blood in the water. Historically, Silvester used this platform to dismantle Vincent's logistics, mocking the emotional instability of the Storybrook designs. As Silvester walked toward the stage, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. He climbed the stairs, his boots echoing with a heavy, deliberate thud. When he reached the podium, Vincent didn't look at him. He stepped aside, his head bowed slightly, his chest heaving in shallow, invisible gasps. He looked like a man waiting for a firing squad. Silvester stepped up to the microphone. He looked out at the sea of vultures in tuxedos. Then, he turned his head and looked directly at Vincent. For the first time, Vincent looked back. His hazel eyes widened, blowing wide with shock. He wasn't looking at the microphone or the notes. He was staring at Silvester's face. Specifically, he was staring at that deep, forest green left eye that hadn't existed 48 hours ago. The silence stretched too long. The audience began to fidget. The Storybrook Urban Initiative, Silvester began, his voice dropping an octave, resonant and calm, is often criticized for being too ambitious. Too focused on the human element rather than the bottom line. Vincent's shoulders hiked up toward his ears. He closed his eyes, bracing for the blow. However, Silvester continued, that is exactly why it is the only project in this room worth funding. While the rest of us are building monuments to our own shadows, Vincent Storybrook is building a future. Crown International will not be filing a counterbid. In fact, we are officially throwing our logistical support behind the initiative, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Vincent's eyes snapped open. He looked at Silvester with an expression of pure, unadulterated confusion, his mouth parting slightly. The tremor in his hands didn't stop, but it changed, from the shake of fear to the vibration of total shock. Silvester didn't wait for the applause, which started as a hesitant patter before swelling into a confused roar. He stepped away from the mic and walked straight to Vincent. He leaned in close, his height allowing him to shield Vincent from the front row cameras for a fleeting second. "Breathe, Vincent," Silvester murmured, his voice a low vibration meant only for the man beside him. "The wolves are fed. You can go home now. Your eyes." Vincent whispered, his voice cracking, his gaze locked on the icy blue and the deep green. "Silvester, what the hell is this?" "A change of perspective," Silvester said, offering a ghost of a smile that didn't reach his competitive mask. "Get some sleep, Storybrook. You look like death." Silvester turned and walked off the stage, leaving his rival standing in the spotlight, not as a victim, but as a victor he never asked to be. Chapter 3, Cracks in the Facet. The concrete ribs of the underground parking garage groaned under the weight of the skyscraper above. Here, away from the flashbulbs and the clinking flute glasses, the air was stagnant and smelled of damp stone and expensive exhaust. Silvester walked with a deliberate, steady stride toward his obsidian-black coupe. He wasn't surprised when he heard the frantic, uneven echo of footsteps behind him. He didn't even turn around when the screech of dress shoes on concrete announced a sudden halt. "Silvester. Stop right there." Silvester paused, his hand hovering over the door handle. He took a breath, centering himself, before turning to face the man he had spent a lifetime, and a death, trying to crush. Vincent looked wrecked. The fluorescent overhead lights were unkind, casting deep, sallow shadows under his eyes. His tie was loosened, his collar rumpled, and his chest heaved as if he'd run a marathon rather than walked 100 yards. His pupils were blown wide, darting across Silvester's face with a frantic, predatory suspicion. "What is this?" Vincent spat, his voice trembling with a cocktail of exhaustion and adrenaline. "The logistical support? The public endorsement? Is this a buyout? A hostile takeover disguised as charity? Answer me." Silvester leaned back against his car, crossing his arms. He loomed over Vincent, his silver hair shimmering like mercury in the dim light. "It was an endorsement, Vincent. Nothing more, nothing less." "Liar." Vincent stepped into Silvester's personal space, his finger trembling as he pointed it at Silvester's chest. "You've spent 3 years trying to bleed my company dry. You don't just change your mind on a Tuesday. And your eyes." Vincent's voice hitched. He stared into the heterochromatic gaze, the icy blue he knew, and the deep, mossy green he didn't. "What did you do to them? Contacts? Surgery? Is this some sick psychological tactic to keep me off balance? To make me look at you and wonder who the hell I'm talking to?" "It's just me, Vincent," Silvester said softly. Too softly. The lack of bite in his voice seemed to scare Vincent more than a shout would have. Suddenly, Vincent's breath hitched. A sharp, audible wheeze escaped his throat. He reached into his blazer pocket, his fingers fumbling desperately for a small plastic bottle, but his coordination was failing. The bottle slipped, clattering onto the concrete and skittering under Silvester's car. Vincent froze. His face went ghostly pale, his eyes fixed on the dark void beneath the vehicle where his lifeline had vanished. His hands began to shake violently, not the tremor of anger now, but the unmistakable vibration of a nervous system collapsing. I can't." Vincent gasped, clutching his own throat. The world was closing in on him, the gray pillars of the garage were becoming a cage. Silvester didn't hesitate. He didn't mock. He moved with a grace his previous self never possessed. Instead of grabbing the pills, he stepped directly into Vincent's line of sight, using his massive frame to wall off the rest of the garage. He was a shield of charcoal wool and silver hair. "Look at me, Vincent." "Only at me," Silvester commanded. His voice wasn't a taunt, it was an anchor. "Get away." Vincent choked out, though his hands instinctively bunched into the fabric of Silvester's lapels to keep himself upright. "No. Breathe with me." Silvester placed his large, warm hands over Vincent's, pinning the smaller man's trembling fingers to his own chest. "In for 4. Follow the rhythm of my heart. Focus on the green eye, Vincent. Just the green. It's still. It's not going anywhere." Vincent's forehead pressed against Silvester's collarbone. He was sobbing now, though no tears fell, just dry, ragged gasps of air. He could feel the steady, tectonic thrum of Silvester's heartbeat beneath his palms. It was impossibly slow. Impossibly calm. Minute by minute, the garage stopped spinning. The crushing weight on Vincent's lungs began to lift, replaced by the scent of Silvester's sandalwood cologne and the heat radiating from his body. "Why?" Vincent whispered into Silvester's chest, his voice broken. "Why are you doing this? You hate me. Silvester looked down at the dark hair pressed against his suit. He felt a fierce, protective ache he hadn't known he was capable of. In his first life, he would have recorded this moment. He would have used it to prove Vincent Storybrook was unfit to lead. I don't hate you, Silvester said, his voice a low rumble that Vincent could feel in his bones. I was just too blind to see that the person I was fighting was the only one worth saving. He gently de-angled Vincent's hands and knelt, reaching under the car to retrieve the pill bottle. He stood and placed it in Vincent's palm, closing the other man's fingers over it. Go home, Vincent, Silvester said, his dual-colored eyes locking onto Vincent's bewildered ones. And lock your door. I'll see you tomorrow. As Silvester got into his car and drove away, he watched Vincent in the rearview mirror. Vincent was standing perfectly still, clutching the bottle to his chest, staring at the red taillights as if he were seeing a ghost. Chapter 4, The Shadow of the Scandal. In the original timeline, Elena's cheating had been Silvester's masterpiece of cruelty. He had hired the private investigators, caught the photos of Elena Sloane in a hotel suite with a rival architect, and leaked them to the press exactly 10 minutes before Vincent's keynote speech. He had watched from the wings as Vincent's phone blew up, watching the man's face drain of color as his world dissolved into public mockery. Now, sitting in his office on the 24th floor, Silvester stared at the calendar. March 12th. Not this time, Silvester whispered. He didn't hire investigators. He didn't need to. He remembered the hotel. He remembered the room number. He also knew that Elena wasn't just cheating, she was planning to siphon off Vincent's personal assets before making a clean break. Silvester intercepted her at a discreet cafe 3 blocks from the Storybrook offices. Elena was elegant, sharp-featured, and currently looking at Silvester with a mixture of boredom and irritation. Silvester. If you're here to talk about the merger, talk to Vincent's secretaries, she said, stirring her espresso. I'm here to talk about the Fairmont Hotel, room 402, Silvester said. His voice was cold, matching the icy blue of his right eye. And the offshore account you opened last Tuesday. Elena froze. The spoon clattered against the porcelain. I don't know what you're. I don't care about your extracurriculars, Elena, Silvester interrupted, leaning forward. His green eye seemed to glow with a predatory intensity. But you are going to break up with Vincent. Today. You will tell him it's over, you will take your belongings, and you will leave the country. If you touch a single cent of his personal holdings, I will ensure you spend the next decade in a cell so small you'll forget what the sky looks like. You're protecting him. Elena let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. The great Silvester Crown is playing bodyguard for his rival. Does he know his enemy is this obsessed with him? He doesn't need to know, Silvester said, his jaw tight. He just needs to be safe. What Silvester hadn't accounted for was the very thing he had spent years exploiting, Vincent's hypervigilance. The cafe door swung open, the bell chiming a frantic warning. Vincent stood there, his coat damp from the sudden spring rain, his face a mask of betrayed confusion. He had followed Elena, suspecting her lies, only to find her huddled in a corner with the one man he feared most. Vincent, Elena gasped, her voice pitching into a practiced, defensive whine. Silvester was just telling me. Get out, Vincent said. His voice was low, vibrating with a dangerous, brittle energy. Elena didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her bag and fled, leaving the two men in a silence so heavy it felt physical. Vincent walked to the table, his hands shoved deep into his pockets to hide their shaking. He looked down at Silvester, his eyes red-rimmed from another night of insomnia. First the awards, Vincent began, his voice cracking. Then the parking garage. And now you're meeting my girlfriend in secret. What is this, Silvester? Are you taking everything? My company, my sanity, and now her? Vincent, it's not what it looks like, Silvester said, standing up. He tried to reach out, but Vincent flinched back as if burned. Don't. Vincent shouted, drawing the stares of the other patrons. "Stop acting like you care. You're the antagonist of my life, Silvester. You've always been the shadow at my heels. If you're going to ruin me, just do it. Don't pretend to be my salvation while you're twisting the knife." Vincent turned and bolted into the rain. Silvester stood alone in the cafe, the smell of burnt coffee and rain-slicked wool hanging in the air. He had prevented the public scandal, but he had accidentally become the villain in a different tragedy. He realized then that devotion without trust was just another form of haunting. He looked at his reflection in the cafe window. The green eye looked back, mournful and deep. "I'm not twisting the knife, Vincent," he murmured to the empty chair. "I'm trying to catch it." Chapter 5, The Spiral Begins. The 3 days following the cafe confrontation were a hollow, ringing silence. Vincent Storybrook had vanished. He wasn't at his office, he wasn't answering his board of directors, and according to the GPS tracker Silvester had, perhaps obsessively, installed on Vincent's sedan in the previous timeline, the car hadn't moved from his private penthouse in 72 hours. Silvester didn't knock. He used the emergency keycard he'd acquired through a corporate bypass months ago, stepping into a tomb of glass and cold air. The penthouse was a graveyard of ambition. Expensive blueprints were scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. The smell was stale, unwashed laundry, bitter coffee, and the sharp, chemical tang of spilled medication. "Vincent?" Silvester's voice was a low rumble, cutting through the stagnant air. There was no answer. He found him in the master suite. The curtains were drawn tight, sealing out the city lights. Vincent was slumped against the base of his bed, a single lamp on the floor casting long, jagged shadows against the wall. He looked skeletal. His skin was the color of parchment, and his eyes, sunken and ringed with bruised purple, stared at a spot on the carpet with terrifying intensity. He didn't even blink when Silvester walked in. "You're back," Vincent croaked. His voice sounded like grinding stones. "Come to finish the job? To watch the Storybrook legacy finally stop breathing?" Silvester didn't snap back. He didn't even stand over him. He sat down on the floor, 3 feet away, mirroring Vincent's slumped posture. "I've seen you win, Vincent. I've seen you lose. But I've never seen you give up." "Elena's gone," Vincent whispered, a jagged, hysterical laugh bubbling in his throat. "She left a note. Said she couldn't handle the instability. Said you warned her about me. You won, Silvester. You took the only person who. She was cheating on you, Vincent." The silence that followed was absolute. Vincent finally turned his head, his neck craning with a slow, painful stiffness. "She was using your accounts to fund a firm in Dubai. She was planning to leave you the moment the urban initiative went public," Silvester said, his green eyes steady and grounded in the dark. "I didn't tell her to leave because I wanted you alone. I told her to leave because she was a parasite, and you are already bleeding out." Vincent's breath hitched, a sharp, rattling sound. "You're lying. You're just playing the hero to see me crawl." "Look at me," Silvester commanded. He reached out, his large hand cupping Vincent's jaw. His skin was burning with fever, while Vincent's was ice cold. Silvester forced Vincent to meet his gaze, the icy blue of the rival he hated, and the deep, soulful green of the man who had died once to save him. "I died once, Vincent," Silvester lied, or perhaps told the truest truth he possessed. "In the dark. In the cold. And all I could think about was how much time I wasted trying to be your enemy when I could have been your harbor. I'm not leaving this room until you sleep. I don't care if I have to hold you down myself." Vincent tried to push him away, but his strength was gone. He collapsed forward, his head thumping against Silvester's broad chest. His fingers curled into Silvester's expensive shirt, bunching the fabric in a desperate, white-knuckled grip. "I can't sleep," Vincent sobbed, the sound muffled against Silvester's heart. "Every time I close my eyes, the world falls apart. The company, the scandal, you. The world isn't falling apart, Silvester murmured, his hand coming up to rest on the back of Vincent's neck, his thumb tracing the base of his skull. I'm holding it together. Just for tonight. I'll be the rival. I'll be the antagonist. Let me carry the weight so you can close your eyes. For the first time in weeks, the tension in Vincent's shoulders snapped. He didn't move to the bed. He stayed right there, anchored to the man he was supposed to hate, his breathing slowly sinking with the steady, rhythmic thrum of Silvester's pulse. Silvester stayed awake. He watched the shadows move across the ceiling, his heterochromatic eyes scanning the dark like a sentry. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry, and a reborn soul, and right now, his only purpose was to be the pillow for a broken man's head. Chapter 6, The Anchor and the Storm. The transition from rival to live-in guardian was not a graceful one. It was a hostile takeover of a domestic space. Silvester didn't ask for permission. The morning after Vincent finally collapsed into a restorative sleep, Silvester had his personal assistant deliver 3 trunks of clothes and a high-end espresso machine to the Storybrook penthouse. By the time Vincent staggered out of the bedroom, bleary-eyed and disoriented, Silvester was already seated at the kitchen island, a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. "What are you doing?" Vincent's voice was a sleep-thickened rasp. He was wearing an oversized hoodie and pajama pants, looking far removed from the shark-like CEO the world knew. "I'm protecting my investment," Silvester said without looking up. "Your board of directors is already whispering about erratic behavior. If I'm seen entering and leaving this building daily, the narrative changes from Vincent is having a breakdown to the Crown Storybrook merger is in secret negotiations. It buys you time to heal without the vultures circling." Vincent leaned against the doorframe, a frown deepening the lines on his tired face. "And what do you get out of it?" Silvester finally looked up. His icy blue eye was sharp, professional, but his green eye lingered on the tremor still visible in Vincent's hands. "I get to ensure my only worthy opponent doesn't retire before I'm finished with him." The days that followed were a strange, silent choreography. They were 2 men who only knew how to communicate through legal filings and aggressive bidding wars, now forced to share a toaster. Silvester transformed the penthouse into a fortress of routine. He replaced Vincent's diet of black coffee and anxiety meds with actual meals, protein, greens, things that didn't come out of a vending machine. He didn't cook fancy meals, he made utilitarian fuel, as he called it, though the way he carefully plated the food suggested a tenderness he refused to voice. Vincent, for his part, spent the first 48 hours in a state of hypervigilant suspicion. He watched Silvester from the corners of rooms, waiting for the hidden camera to appear or the blackmail contract to be slid across the table. The breaking point came on the 3rd night. Vincent was staring at a pile of blueprints, his breathing starting to hitch. The familiar spiral was beginning, the feeling that the walls were thinning, that the failed label was being etched into his skin. Suddenly, a heavy weight landed on his shoulders. He flinched, but it wasn't a hand, it was a weighted blanket. Silvester had draped it over him before moving to the kitchen to start the kettle. "You don't have to be perfect tonight, Vincent," Silvester said, his back turned. "The blueprints aren't going to change if you look at them for another 6 hours. Why are you being so, this?" Vincent burst out, his voice cracking. He stood up, the blanket sliding to the floor. "You're Silvester Crown. You're supposed to be the man who steps on my fingers while I'm hanging off the ledge. This devotion, this loyalty, it's more terrifying than your hatred ever was." Silvester turned around slowly. He walked across the room until he was inches from Vincent, his shadow swallowing the smaller man. He didn't reach out. He simply stood there, an immovable mountain. "In my old life," Silvester said, his voice a low, haunting vibration, "I thought that winning meant standing alone at the top. But I realized too late that the view is worthless if there's no one left to challenge you." He reached out then, his thumb brushing a stray lock of silver dark hair from Vincent's forehead. The touch was brief, almost clinical, but the heat of it lingered like a brand. I'm not being a saint, Vincent. I'm being selfish. I've decided that your survival is the only thing that makes my life interesting. So, eat the soup. Go to sleep. And stop looking for a knife in my hand, I'm using it to cut your vegetables. Vincent looked up at him, his hazel eyes searching the heterochromatic ones. For the first time, he didn't see a rival. He saw a man who was desperately trying to rewrite his own soul. The green eye, Vincent whispered, his guard finally dropping an inch. It's softer than the blue one. Then look at that one, Silvester replied. It's the only part of me that's never lied to you. Chapter 7, Trading Bitter for Sweet. The atmosphere in the penthouse had shifted. The sharp, jagged edges of their rivalry had been sanded down by 2 weeks of shared breakfasts and late-night silences, replaced by a hum of domesticity that felt both fragile and intoxicating. It was 2 a.m. The only light in the expansive living area came from the glow of 3 oversized monitors and a few scattered desk lamps. They were working side by side, a sight that would have sent shockwaves through the financial district. Vincent was refining the structural aesthetics of the urban initiative, while Silvester sat on the sofa with a laptop, using his influence to quietly dismantle the legal hurdles Vincent's enemies had placed in his path. You're doing it again, Silvester said, not looking up from his screen. Vincent paused, his digital pen hovering over the tablet. Doing what? Grinding your teeth. Your jaw is so tight I can hear it from here. Silvester set his laptop aside and stood up. He walked over to the kitchen island, returning a moment later with a glass of water and a small square of dark chocolate. Take a break. Your brain is looping. Vincent sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The frantic energy of his anxiety was still there, but it was no longer a storm, it was a dull thud. I just keep thinking about the launch. If I fail this time, Silvester, there's no coming back. I've put everything into this. My reputation, my family's name. You won't fail, Silvester said firmly. He leaned against the desk, his presence looming but no longer threatening. Because I'm the one handling the logistics. And I don't lose. Vincent looked up at him, a tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Such an arrogant bastard. Even when you're being nice. It's not arrogance if it's a fact, Silvester countered. He reached out, his fingers brushing against Vincent's temple. This time, Vincent didn't flinch. He leaned into the touch, a soft sigh escaping his lips. The air between them thickened. The professional distance they had maintained, the rivalry they used as a shield, began to melt. Vincent's gaze traveled from Silvester's sharp, aristocratic jawline to his eyes. He found himself mesmerized by the duality of them. I used to think your blue eye was like a glacier, Vincent whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the computers. Cold enough to freeze anything it touched. But the green one. He reached up, his own fingers trembling slightly as he traced the line of Silvester's brow. It feels like spring. Like something finally growing after a long winter. Silvester's breath hitched. He caught Vincent's hand, pressing the palm against his cheek. He felt the heat of Vincent's skin, the frantic pulse in his wrist. In his past life, Silvester had wanted to possess Vincent, to break him until he was nothing but a trophy of his own success. In this life, he just wanted to hold him together. Vincent, Silvester murmured, his voice thick with a sudden, raw honesty. I didn't come back to win a business deal. I came back because the world was empty without you in it. The confession hung in the air, heavy and sweet. Vincent's eyes widened, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't ask what Silvester meant by coming back. He didn't care about the logic or the impossibility of the statement. He only cared about the way Silvester was looking at him, with a devotion that felt like a prayer. Vincent stood up, closing the small gap between them. He reached for Silvester's collar, pulling him down. When their lips met, it wasn't a clash of titans, it was a desperate, quiet surrender. It tasted of coffee and salt, of years of wasted hatred and the sudden, terrifying hope of something new. Silvester wrapped his arms around Vincent's waist, pulling him flush against his chest, shielding him as he had in the parking garage, but this time, there were no cameras to hide from. There was only the two of them, two broken halves finally finding a rhythm that worked. "Don't leave," Vincent breathed against his lips, his fingers tangling in Silvester's silver hair. "Never," Silvester promised, his green eye burning with a fierce, protective light. "I'll be the anchor, Vincent. For as long as you need to stay grounded." Chapter 8, The Anniversary of the Crash. The sky over the mountain pass was a bruised purple, heavy with the scent of ozone and the impending violence of a storm. Silvester sat in the passenger seat of Vincent's sleek obsidian sedan, his hands clenched so tightly in his lap that his tendons looked like harp strings. He knew this road. He knew the exact angle of every curve, the way the mist clung to the pines, and the terrifying height of the bridge that lay 5 miles ahead. March 2nd. The anniversary of his death. "You're awfully quiet," Vincent said, casting a concerned glance toward Silvester. Vincent looked healthier than he had in years, the color had returned to his face, and his grip on the steering wheel was firm, not frantic. "If you're worried about the gala, don't be. Your logistical support has made us untouchable." "I'm not worried about the gala," Silvester said, his voice sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a deep well. He turned to look at Vincent. The icy blue eye was fixed on the road, but the green eye was fixed on the man beside him. "Vincent, pull over. Let me drive. We're already behind schedule, Silvester. Besides, you said you liked my driving." Vincent offered a small, playful smirk, but it died when he saw the sheer terror in Silvester's gaze. "What is it? Are you having a panic attack? Is it your turn now? Just, please. Trust me." But before Vincent could respond, the heavens opened. Rain lashed against the windshield with a sound like falling gravel. Visibility vanished in an instant, reduced to the blurry red glow of taillights somewhere ahead. The road became a river of oil and water. Silvester's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "This is it. This is the moment." "The bridge is coming up," Silvester whispered. "Vincent, slow down. Now." "I am slowing down. I can't see anything." Vincent's voice climbed an octave, the old anxiety clawing at his throat. He tapped the brakes, but the car hydroplaned slightly, the tires let out a ghostly hiss. Ahead of them, a silver car swerved, just as it had in the first timeline. It hit a patch of black ice and spun, a chaotic metal top careening directly into their lane. "Silvester!" Vincent screamed, slamming on the brakes. The car began to fishtail. The headlights swept across the wet pavement, illuminating the jagged, broken gap in the guardrail where Silvester had plunged to his death a year ago. The dark maw of the river waited below, cold and hungry. "Look at me!" Silvester roared over the screech of the tires. He didn't grab the wheel to fight Vincent, he reached over and placed his hand over Vincent's, steadying the steering. With his other hand, he reached for the emergency brake, pulling it with a surgical, rhythmic precision he had practiced in his mind 1,000 times since his rebirth. "In for 4, Vincent. We are not going over." Silvester steered them into the spin, not away from it. He used his weight to lean into the turn, his dual-colored eyes locked on the horizon he knew was there, even through the sheets of rain. The car groaned, the metal complaining as it skidded sideways, the back tire clipping the edge of the concrete. For a heartbeat, the car balanced on the precipice of the abyss. Then, with a bone-jarring thud, the tires found purchase. The sedan slammed into the remaining section of the guardrail. Silence followed, save for the rhythmic tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine and the frantic sobbing of the rain against the roof. Vincent was slumped against the steering wheel, his chest heaving. Silvester, his ears ringing and his chest bruised by the seatbelt, reached over and gently pulled Vincent into his arms. He checked for blood, for broken glass, nothing. They were alive. You saved us, Vincent gasped, his face buried in the crook of Silvester's neck. How did you know? You saw it before it happened. Silvester held him, his chin resting on Vincent's dark hair. He looked out at the broken guardrail, the spot where he should have been a ghost. The icy blue eye seemed to dim, while the green eye glowed with the triumph of a man who had finally cheated the Reaper. I've lived this moment every day for a year, Silvester whispered into the rain-heavy air. I didn't come back to win, Vincent. I came back to make sure you never had to see how the story ended without me. Chapter 9, A New Destination. The gala was only 3 miles away. Somewhere in a ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers, the elite of the city were waiting for the two titans to arrive, ready to judge their success, their failure, and the state of their legendary feud. Silvester looked at the distant glow of the city lights, then back at Vincent, who was still trembling in his arms. The smell of burnt rubber and rain hung heavy in the cabin of the wrecked car. Let them wait, Silvester said, his voice a low, decisive rasp. The launch. Vincent murmured, though he made no move to pull away. The board, they'll say I've finally snapped. Let them say it. I've spent 2 lifetimes caring what those ghosts think, Silvester said. He reached over, cupping Vincent's face with both hands. The icy blue eye and the deep green eye were both brimming with a fierce, quiet clarity. We aren't going to the gala, Vincent. We're going home. Not to your penthouse or mine. Somewhere the phones don't ring. Vincent looked at the broken guardrail, the edge of the world he had almost fallen over. Then he looked at Silvester. The suspicion that had defined their relationship for years had finally vanished, replaced by a terrifying, beautiful vulnerability. Okay, Vincent whispered. Home. They didn't call a car service. The police officers on the scene couldn't stop them from leaving after Silvester gave his statement and the dashcam footage. Silvester managed to restart the engine. The sedan was battered, its front bumper hanging by a thread, but it was functional. He drove slowly, steering them away from the mountain pass and toward a small coastal estate Silvester had purchased in secret months ago, a place that didn't exist in the records of his first life. By the time they reached the house, the storm had settled into a soft, rhythmic drizzle. The air smelled of salt and wet earth. Inside, the house was warm, filled with the scent of cedar and the low hum of a fireplace Silvester kindled himself. He brought Vincent a thick sweater and a glass of brandy, watching as the color finally returned to the other man's lips. Vincent sat on the rug before the hearth, staring into the flames. Why did your eyes change, Silvester? Really? Silvester sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. He knew he couldn't tell the full truth, that he was a man who had drowned and woken up in the past, but he could tell the heart of it. Because the man I was died, Silvester said, his gaze fixed on the fire. He died wanting things that didn't matter. He died thinking that the only way to be close to you was to be your enemy. When I woke up, the world looked different. One eye stayed in the past, a reminder of the cold. The other. He turned to Vincent, the green eye reflecting the dancing orange flames. The other only wants to see you breathe. Vincent reached out, his fingers tracing the scar on Silvester's forehead from the airbag. I spent so long trying to survive you. I didn't know how to just be. Then let's learn, Silvester said. In the morning, the news would be full of the disappearance of the 2 CEOs. The stocks might dip, the scandals might swirl, and the rivalries of the boardrooms would continue their hollow cycles. But in this quiet house by the sea, the failed rival and the grieving lead were gone. Silvester leaned in, pressing his forehead against Vincent's. The silence was no longer a tomb, it was a sanctuary. I was supposed to be your ruin, Silvester whispered. No, Vincent replied, closing his eyes as he drifted toward a sleep that was finally free of nightmares. You were the only salvation worth choosing. Silvester watched him fall asleep, his hand resting over Vincent's heart. He had traded his bitterness for devotion, his pride for a second chance. He was no longer the antagonist of the story. He was the anchor. And as long as he held on, the world would never wash them away again. Thank you for listening under the same moon. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're always welcome here. Good night.